You are going to run an adventure for your friends tonight for free with an adventure that you made. Well, we made. Okay, I made. The point is the same. This might seem familiar because this video is somewhat inspired by Matt Colville, who has a great series of videos that you're probably already familiar with that has introduced, I think it's fair to say, thousands of people to GMing. Welcome back, everybody. This is GDS. Before we start this video, I want you to give me your best tips or advice that you have for a new GM. Or if you're a new GM, let me know what are the questions that you have about running the game. I want to see your response in the blah blah below. This is a small channel. I don't get many comments. So if you're going to comment, I'm going to see it, respond to it, heart it. So let's get a conversation going. I've been waiting to make this video for a long time because I've been kind of afraid to do it because I think this is one of the most important topics. So it might end up being, at least for now, my most important video. And that's because this is about, hopefully, everything you need to start playing and run a game for your friends tonight. Many of my videos, as well as other videos online, talk about creating NPCs, worlds, pantheons, universes, and this can make the job of the GM seem impossible. Running a game can also seem daunting if you're a player because it seems like the GM has so much to keep track of and make work from behind the screen. It seems like you have to run NPCs, keep an entire world in your head, and most of all, lead a group of players for several hours. What I want to show you with this video is that while GMing has its own depth, starting to GM and actually doing a good job at it is not only easier than you think, it's also fun. Let's talk about what you're going to need. You're going to need 4 things. You're going to need the rules, you're going to need a group of friends, you're going to need some pre-generated characters, and you're going to need an adventure. Number 1, the rules. If you're brand new to the game, you might feel the need to buy some D&D books, maybe the Core 3, the Player's Handbook, the DM's Guide, and the Monster's Manual. But there are many other books out there, and you might also feel the urge to read them cover to cover before you do anything else. Not only would this take you a very long time, it's also completely unnecessary. All the rules you need to run the game tonight can be found online for free. It's my opinion that much of the free stuff that you're going to find online is better curated and of superior quality than any of the advice or modules you will get from official D&D material. When you're looking at the rules, a good thing to do first is to familiarize yourself with the character sheet, what everything is used for and how it's determined. Whatever you don't know, just look up and write down. The reason to start with a character sheet is because that's the player's interface. It's the medium through which the player interacts with the game. A good character sheet is secretly a summary of the game. Plus, players will ask you questions about their character sheets later on, so it's important to know how it works. That's pretty much everything you need for the rules. If you're running D&D, I'm sure you can find stuff yourself, but if you can't, I'm going to leave some helpful places you can look in the nonsense below. If you're not running D&D, I'm sure you could do some Google foo and find whatever it is you need to find. Number 2, friends. You want between 3 and 4. Not in general, for this game. You want enough players so that they can work off of each other and plan together, but not so many that it slows the game down. I recommend that you run for people you know, like I said, friends. There are far too many variables that can make running for random people for your first time a disaster. Another important thing for your first game is to send everybody some kind of message to make sure everyone is aligned on what's going on. You're running a game for everybody tonight. This is your first time running, you're super excited, and it's going to be a blast. Depending on what you're running, tell the people the focus of your game. For D&D, for example, there'll be heroes, there'll be killing monsters, getting loot, and saving innocents. There'll be snacks, there'll be drinks, so show up. Now 3, pre-generated characters. If you're playing D&D or many of the other popular tabletop RPGs, there are many pre-generated characters that were probably made by the creators of the game that you can just steal and use. You want characters that are not super low power and not super high power. For D&D, I would recommend something like level 3 to 5. You want players to have enough to do some cool things, but not too much that it's overwhelming. Well, in the future, you'll be expecting players to know what their own characters do and manage all that stuff. For your first time, it's a good idea to read through the pre-generated character sheets and understand how they work. Be able to explain what kind of stuff they can do, and also players are going to ask you questions about how stuff works and what the character does. Be ready to answer those questions. Now 4, an adventure. You'll be running something that's called a one-shot, which is an adventure that takes around 2 to 4 hours, which you will play through in a single sitting. Because we will run a one-shot, it's very important that we onboard the players quickly. We want to get from sitting at the table to actually playing the game as soon as possible. For this reason, our strategy is going to be to have a short intro scene where everybody describes their characters and maybe you describe their surroundings, and then we'll be thrust right into the adventure. When we make our adventure, we want it to be inbuilt drama so that players are hooked and engaged all the way through. This is not only because that's fun, it's also practical. We only have 2 to 4 hours to finish this session. We will design our adventure with a dramatic structure, in this case, the popular 5-room dungeon. If you want to hear more about the 5-room dungeon, I have a great video about it, and you can also just look it up. And by the way, if you're doing this yourself, don't worry, the rooms don't need to be rooms, and the dungeon doesn't need to be a dungeon. All it means is that we'll be breaking down our adventure to 5 manageable pieces, which all fit a certain archetype. That said, a dungeon or a closed structure is a great idea because it limits the scope of what's possible and makes running the game easier. To make sure that we maintain drama all the way through, we need to make sure that we have the 3 components of drama. Number 1 is an actionable verb. Players need to know what it is they need to do in order to do it, so they don't just spin their wheels and do nothing. Players like to be told what to do, just not how to do it. Number 2 in drama is urgency. We need something to make sure that the players will want to drive forward instead of getting stuck on stuff that doesn't matter. Number 3 is stakes, which is also related to urgency. It is what's driving the players forward. What is at stake? That can be something that you lose if you're not successful, or something that you gain if you are successful. For our one-shot, our dramatic imperative, if you will, is going to be the blacksmith will pay you handsomely if you can rescue his daughter from being sacrificed by the local goblins. Pulling this apart, the actionable verb is rescue. It's very clear what you need to do in order to rescue someone. These stakes are that if you're successful, you'll be paid handsomely, and if you're not successful, someone innocent might die. The urgency is that we need to do all of this before the daughter is sacrificed. Who knows how long we have? So let's start planning the session. Before the 5-room dungeon, like we said, we're going to have an intro scene. When players think about fantasy stories, many of them think about starting in a tavern, so why not? You want players to start feeling like they're part of a fantasy story. Describe the players sitting down and enjoying some food or drinks. Just know that you don't have to invent a waiter and an entire menu. There are many things you have to juggle when you're GMing, so the less you have to juggle, the better. This is one of the many skills that you are going to learn as you grow as a GM, which is which parts to simply dictate, narrate, or describe, and which parts to ask players' input in. In this case, we're simply going to describe the players getting food and drinks, and maybe we're also going to describe everybody avoiding them and maybe lowering their gaze. Nobody wants to talk to them or give them any business. Everybody will be polite, but short. They'll answer questions, but they won't initiate anything. This is an easy way to not only give the world verisimilitude, you'll see why that is in a second, but also to make sure that you don't need to run all these random NPCs that the players can talk to and might have names, backstories, etc. In case you don't know what verisimilitude means, it's the appearance or feeling that a fictional world is real. The reason we want to achieve verisimilitude is because we want players to feel immersed in our fictional world. In case you don't know, NPC stands for non-playable character, which is basically a character that you, the GM, runs. Usually these characters don't actually use character sheets. Sometimes they have stats and weapons. It really depends. Some NPCs last for 1 session, and some of them last for an entire campaign. The local folk are suspicious of the players because they just walked into town, nobody knows who they are, they're carrying around weapons and armor. These are dangerous people. Suddenly, the blacksmith will burst through the door of the tavern and say something like, "My daughter, the goblins, they have her." Who knows where I stole that from, but at this point the heroes, because they're heroes, will feel compelled to help, at least ask the blacksmith if there's anything they can do. If they don't do this, you can have something like an old man volunteer to go, someone who's clearly not equipped for the job, and maybe that will make the players or heroes feel more motivated to actually do something. Once the players say yes, we're on. We're going to start the actual structure of the adventure, starting with the 5-room dungeon. In our first room of our 5-room dungeon, we'll describe the players getting some supplies and asking where the goblin encampment is. They'll be told that the goblin encampment is right past the dark forest, but no one really has been to the dark forest in a long time, and it's a really bad idea to stay there overnight. That said, this journey is going to take a day. So the players are going to have to do this. The players go, and so our adventure and our journey begins. We want it to feel like a fantastical journey, which is why we need to make it feel dangerous. When the players camp overnight in the dark forest, they'll be attacked by a group of wolves. Will our heroes survive their journey through the dark forest and emerge to rescue the blacksmith's daughter? I guess we shall see. The second room in our 5-room dungeon is going to be an actual room. As the players come into the dungeon, they'll see a floor filled with snakes. Classic. Across this low pit full of vipers, they'll see the continuation of the dungeon. But how are they going to get across? It's not clear. This is another GM muscle to flex. Make problems, not solutions. If the players ask, make it clear that you don't have a solution to the problem. And then you'll see that players will come up with different inventive solutions for how to get across this pit of vipers or whatever it is you choose to put there. Answer clarifying questions about things that their characters would know about the world. And then when they come up with a solution that makes you think, yeah, that should work, just make it work. After the corridor full of vipers, we'll go to the third room, which is blocked by a great wooden door. The players will also see that there is a small tunnel that nobody can get through unless they're a halfling or a goblin-sized creature that probably, it looks like, goes around the door through the wall. The idea here is that the door is trapped. If you try to open it, it's going to spray a flammable gas or oil, which, if you're an adventurer, you're probably holding a torch, which will make you catch on fire. When the goblins get here, they just go through the little tunnel to the other side. This trap may seem like a mean-spirited jab at the players. In some games, it's called a take that mechanic, which is pretty self-explanatory. But here it's important to remember that while you're running the bad guys, you are not the bad guys. The bad guys are against the players. You are not against the players. Tricking or killing player characters on purpose would be no fun and extremely easy. You have full control over the entire world and how you describe it to your players. We give players setbacks and challenges because we want to give them a chance to prevail over adversities and be heroes. Believe it or not, as the GM, you're on the player's side. Ask the players how they approach this door and what they do. You can ask them something, are you being careful or are you just knocking the door down trying to surprise anyone on the other side? If the players are being careful, describe that they see the trap. They see what's going on. And if they come up with a solution of how to disable it or circumnavigate it, make it work. Maybe on the other side, the mechanism of the trap is not hidden at all. So if the thief is a halfling, they can just go through the tunnel and disable it. Maybe you can disable it by tweaking with it with thieves' tools. I don't know. I don't know what your players will come up with. I don't know what your players will come up with. That will depend on them, and that's part of the draw of this game. Once they open this door, there'll be two ways to go. One of them is going to be a corridor that seems to be collapsed. Behind it is going to be a collapsed area of the goblin hideout with some dead goblins that have turned into skeletons and are now living skeletons. There's nothing in this room except enemies. It serves to show that the world is dangerous, and if players don't go there, which they don't have to, they'll always wonder, what was behind that rubble? I wonder. Again, don't come up with a solution of how to get through the rubble or remove it. Your players will surprise you with the solutions they come up with. The second way to go, from which players will hear ritual chanting, is going to be the ritual room, which is the fourth room. We will touch this in a second. This third room they're in seems to be the main room where the goblins live. It has maybe some food scraps and a dead fire, maybe some bedrolls, maybe even some dead people that the goblins dragged in here. Now, the fourth room is going to be the ritual room, which the players can walk right into. Again, ask the players how they approach this. If they're being sneaky, then maybe they'll catch the goblins off guard. If they just are loud and break in, then the goblins will ambush them. As long as the players say something to indicate to you that they are being careful, they should be rewarded for that. Here there will be a bunch of goblins which will attack the players whether they are caught off guard or in an ambush. One of them is going to be stronger and hold a magic sword called the Sword of the Viper. Once per combat, this sword can be used to deal an extra 1d6 poison damage. All the stats for all the enemies and the traps, by the way, are going to be in the nonsense below. At the end of the fight, weakened, the goblin boss will get on his knees and grovel and beg. He will say that he was made to do this by his master, the reptile god. Who is the reptile god? What is the reptile god? You don't need to know this now, at all. Just tell the players they don't know who that is, or what that is. It's a mystery. When players end a session with some kind of mystery, they'll want to play again. What do you do now if you're the player? Do you kill this groveling goblin? I mean, he was made to do this. But then again, whether or not he was made to do it, he's killed people He has done terrible things. This is a moral choice. The reason you want to give your players a moral choice is because you can't solve moral choices with a die roll, or with a sword, or with a certain ability that your character has. When you give players problems they can't solve with their character sheets, they'll have to start thinking about their character as part of a greater world. They'll start thinking about the world from their character's perspective, i.e., they'll start role-playing. When some people imagine role-playing, they imagine somebody doing a funny voice. But I think the most important part of role-playing is inhabiting a fictional character and reacting to the fictional world from the perspective of that character. This is fun because how often in your life do you get to debate dramatic moral decisions with your friends? The outcome of whatever they decide will also show them that their decision matters. These two things are other big draws of tabletop RPGs. Now, the fifth room or section is where you describe all the goblins dead, or at least taken care of. They speak to the daughter, and she seems unharmed, but maybe distraught. They can loot the sword from the goblin boss, and they make their way back to town, where everybody is maybe a little less suspicious of them. Now, the way I like to do this, to actually put this on paper, is to actually grab some paper. Any paper works, but I like graph paper because it's divided into pre-divided squares. This makes it easy to measure and draw out rooms, and as an added bonus, it's very likely that in the game you're going to play, for example D&D, character movement is grid-based. So we can just take this map and use it super easily. For a sense of scale when you draw your map, keep in mind how many tiles a character can move in one turn. I like to use a pencil to draw my map so I can change things as I need to. This map will be my reference as the GM. I will not show it directly to my players because it contains hidden information about what's in the rest of the dungeon, maybe monsters, secrets, and passageways. In actuality, what this looks like is I either grab some pieces of paper or a whiteboard and use my map as a reference and draw out the room that the characters are currently in. Once you've drawn your map, and this particular one is going to be in the nonsense below, it's a good idea to run through your adventure by yourself. Just imagine you're playing through it, and take notes on rules that you find yourself looking up. Also make sure you're super ready to run combat, because combat tends to be the most mechanically rigorous part. Now we have everything we need. We have rules, we have friends, we have pre-generated characters, and we have an adventure. What do you actually do from right now to when you end the session? The first thing to do as the night begins is to make sure you have everything you need and set out the table. Make sure you have your notes. You can print them out or you can have them on your laptop. If you print them out, I recommend that you number the pages because it is extremely easy to lose track. Don't ask me how I know. Number 2 is to make sure you have some extra graph paper or a whiteboard to do math on, take notes on, or reveal the dungeon as the players explore it. Number 3, make sure that everybody, including yourself, has something to write with. Number 4 is game pieces, so you can get minis, you could just steal pieces from your local Monopoly game, and also make sure you have all the dice necessary. Number 5 is the pre-made character sheets, you can place them in the middle of the table. And 6 is snacks and drinks, make sure those are all clearly visible and available. Expect people you invited to take 30 minutes to trickle in. For example, if your game is at 7 p.m., expect to not start until at least 7:30. When people sit down, you can have them just browse through the character sheets and look for what's cool. You don't have to explain how it works, they can just look through them and see what calls out to them. Catch up on IRL things now so it doesn't distract you from the game later. Now, as soon as everybody is on the table, ask everybody to sit down and pick their character sheets. Answer any questions they might have. When there are no more questions, just jump straight into your intro scene. If you get stuck not knowing what a rule is or how to resolve something, you make what's called a ruling. It is an on-the-spot decision on what happened that makes sense to you and to the players. This is another GM muscle that you will flex as you become a better GM. And then when the adventure is done, whether that took an hour, 2 hours, 3, or 4, just end the session. Don't feel the need to fill out all 4 hours. Thank everyone for playing. That was fun. I hope so, at least. Maybe interesting. If you have extra time in the evening, play some board games, play some video games, watch a movie. Players will probably want to talk about what happened in the game. There are few pleasures that compare to when players are talking or debating or reminiscing about something that you ran, that you created. And that's fun. That's, I think, everything you need to run a game for free for your friends tonight. I hope you found this video useful. If you made it this far and you think it is useful, consider leaving a like. Let's hit that like button an odd number of times. Let's do 5. Just keep it under 6, for really no reason. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. And if you haven't commented, consider commenting. This is a small channel. I don't get many comments. If you comment, I'll see it and heart it and respond. So let's get a conversation going. I really hope that this video finds at least one new GM and is useful for them for running their first game. I hope that this is everything you need to run a first game. That's my goal. I hope you liked the video. I'll see you later.